Yes, I drove my white cargo van through the Holland Tunnel, 90 feet beneath the river, and I was very much annoyed with traffic because my stick shift was shit. I had to hold second gear in place the entire time with my hand as I drove, or else it could just slip out of place, left, right, without me pressing down on the pedal at the same time, and the transmission could just grind up into dust. New York is not the best place to drive when your van needs to be in third or fourth gear. Celia laughed as I grew frustrated in the dark tunnel, but she was mostly mesmerized by its lights and how long it stretched. She said, "You know, Vicente, I've lived in New York for 15 years and I've never been to New Jersey." Never? She'd flown out of Newark. Still, she insisted. "Oh, you can't count that. Newark is basically international waters. I've never set foot on New Jersey soil before." "Ah, well," I said, "there are probably people who have lived in New Jersey all of their lives and have never actually set foot on real New Jersey soil." An hour later, we pulled into a faceless office park, passing doors with addresses on them, but otherwise, we couldn't tell what happened behind each door. My van practically collapsed outside of 8372. And out front I saw a black sign staked into a potted plant that had wilted weeks or even a year before. The sign's purple letters said 3D Visions. When we walked inside, the air carried the faint scent of melted plastic. Celia and I stood in an incredibly small room with little more in it than a woman behind a desk and another door that appeared to lead deeper into the building. Celia gave me a look, obviously wondering if this was a front for something New Jersey was infamous for. I only smiled back, as if to say, "You will see." The woman behind the desk took note of Celia, myself, and my cases of video equipment. She honked in her Jersey accent. "You the artist?" I looked at Celia. She looked at me, perhaps nudging me along with her eyes. For the first time while standing alongside her in the past 5 years, I could say yes first. The woman picked up her phone and said nothing more than, "He's here." And a moment later, the second door opened. A portly man named Mike DeFrucio walked in. He wore a brown beard and thick brown eyeglasses. His round stomach was held in place by an overloaded collared t-shirt with the company's logo on the left breast. He was very excitable. He said, "Vicente, Vicente, Vicente! I love saying that name! You sound like an assassin! Come in, come in! And the lovely lady must be your assistant?" So many years after the NEA crisis, Celia was only a household name if, say, Cindy Sherman was a household name in your home. Apparently, critical acclaim in this country leads to much less fame than controversy does. Still, we found it less distracting if we only introduced her as my assistant Cece. No, I probably couldn't say that Celia truly worked as my assistant any longer, like we had arranged a decade earlier. She traveled extensively, as you know, and her pieces filled so much of my own time that I worked 60, 70 hours per week for her, overtime when openings approached, which was far too often for either of us. Not just me. Celia constantly complained about the demand. She had to please collector after collector, art fair after art fair, biennial after biennial. She rarely seemed happy, and she seldom worked on the pieces she truly cared about, particularly the even grander epic to follow the apartment building. Instead, she rapidly made work she didn't have her heart in, only making them in order to earn enough money to support the epic. Yes, minor pieces like the feminist baseball cards. She had made entire sets featuring different women artists from throughout the ages, and she wrapped them in individual packets of 20, like the baseball cards she'd seen her brother collect while growing up. She wanted the buyers to actually unwrap the cards, but like some of those shrewd little boys her brother had known, they kept the cards wrapped in order to retain their value. Collectors bought them all up without ever looking at what she printed on them. But Celia found that they were easy to reproduce, and more importantly, an easy way to bring in more money. So she half-heartedly put more and more out into the world. When a panel of guerrilla girls at NYU accused her of commodifying feminism, she was furious for a week. Though I know it was more so with herself than with the gorillas. Was I ever mad at her? Because of the baseball cards? Oh, you mean because of our work dynamic? No, I felt no animosity about that. You seem to be implying that I would, or maybe even should, but I could have walked away from Celia at any time, and she would have understood. Work is work. Besides, my own pieces were included in group shows from time to time. I had a dealer who nobody cared about, but he did give me a solo show once every other year, so I still sold some of my own work. And Celia was a great friend, perhaps my most important friend. She might not have always been available to assist me, but when she couldn't, she often paid for a student to come and help me. So, no, I was not bothered by our dynamic. I was my own artist. Sometimes, more than sometimes. Anyhow, may I continue? I was telling you an origin story. It's much more important than our work dynamic, so please. Yes, we walked through the door and the smell of melted plastic invaded every one of my senses, from my nose to how it made my eyes nearly water, to the taste, to the way that this enormous room felt as if it pressed down upon me. We heard it as well, making its way through machines that hummed up and down the long and narrow warehouse space. Mike DeFrucio guided us down the path of machines, some of them operated by men in white lab coats, others by men dressed in the same company shirt as Mike. Nearly everyone wore protective goggles. The company had a handful of additive manufacturing machines. Now, another company, another manufacturer, for example, might need a new part for one gadget or another, but it might be prohibitively expensive for them to build that one part, especially if it might fail. So they'd send these schematics to 3D visions, which then turned these schematics into codes, which were in turn computed into these very large machines that could make this prototype in less than a day. And Mike DeFrucio could send it back to the company, perhaps even before the last mail truck left the city. Years later, people commonly referred to it as 3D printing. I'd originally visited this office park to film part of a new series I was working on. See, I was my own artist. I was doing a piece about the monotony of daily labor, both blue and white collar. I simply filmed individuals throughout their entire workday, capturing everything I could, trying to find what truly differentiated each type of work and what, in the end, made everyone do the same job, more or less. No, I never filmed myself. After filming a friend of a friend who worked in one of the miniature factories hiding behind these bland office walls, I stood outside smoking a cigarette. And then Mike DeFrucio walked by, and he saw my camera equipment and decided to start asking me questions. Eager to find more workers to film, I had questions as well. And when he brought me into his miniature factory, I was stunned by what I'd found. Later that year, Celia watched one of these machines' nozzles spinning around, dispensing a melted filament like icing on a cake. Now back then, barely anyone had ever seen one of these machines, so she obviously didn't know what was going on. And I didn't want to spoil the surprise. I wanted her to have the same sense of awe that I'd had not long before. Celia continued to watch the nozzle quickly move back and forth, piling up layers of wet plastic in an indiscernible shape. I decided to watch along with her. She appeared to be both in awe and completely unimpressed at the same time. She asked, "What is it doing, Vicente?" "You'll see." After each layer, a platform was slowly lowered, and then the nozzle began dispensing its white plastic once again. It appeared to be a very small prototype, but as it continued, Celia said, "It looks like a tail. A fish tail." And later she'd say, "That's its nose. You see how it's long and narrow?" Yes. And then later, "Now it's doing the back fin." It is a dolphin. I knew it. I can't believe that a computer and a cake decorator just made this thing." Mike DeFrucio opened up the glass panel and pulled out the dolphin for us to see. He held it in his palm. He closed his fingers around it tightly. He held it by the tail and knocked it against the printer. He handed it to Celia and said, "This is nothing. These babies can make incredibly complicated parts." He patted the side of the printer as if it was a beloved Saint Bernard and said, "If you have the time, you can tell it to make a clock with working gears. We once made a functioning prosthetic hand just to see if we could." Celia turned to me. "Will you ask the robot to make a hand?" I laughed. No, I'll have it replicate Duchamp's urinal." And she smacked me in the arm. "That's wonderful. Will it flush?" We both looked at Mike DeFrucio pleadingly. He said, "You didn't say anything about it needing to flush." I laughed again. No, it does not need to flush. In fact, the more useless, the better." Mike DeFrucio smiled and shook his head. He said, "Whatever you say, boss." After we spent the afternoon filming, we packed up our things and said numerous goodbyes to Mike DeFrucio, who assured us he was my #1 fan, and he wanted to be invited to the opening. Well, I had no idea if there'd even be an opening. But of course Celia said, "You'll be Vicente's guest of honor." After all these goodbyes finally ended, Celia and I walked outside. I slid open the van's creaky side door, which always felt as if it might fall off when opened, and I loaded up my video equipment. I thought Celia still stood behind me, enjoying the summer sun that back in Manhattan came and went so quickly between the tall buildings, but when I turned around, she was walking across the parking lot. A small lawn of freshly mown grass grew just past the empty parking spaces. I called out, "Hey, Celia!" She turned back for a moment, and she actually seemed happy for the first time all year on this little vacation away from her own demanding work. I asked, "What are you doing?" She removed her shoes and socks and awkwardly lunged toward the grass on her tiptoes. She turned back to me and paused. She said, "I'm putting my feet on New Jersey soil!" I laughed. She laughed. We made each other laugh. So, please just stop implying anything about our work dynamic. Please focus on what is important.